My friends, welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. I hope you all are doing well. This is a Newswave episode, and folks, I have some crazy stories to share with you all. What spawned this episode began in New Hampshire. There's a story going around right now about an abandoned campsite. In a nutshell, law enforcement was alerted to an abandoned campsite, and when they went to check it out, it was a very bizarre sort of setup. The things that remained in camp inside of the tent and the things that were missing did not make a lot of sense. For an example, the tent was there, the sleeping bag was there, 2 canisters of fuel were there, no stove. There was some clothing that remained, specifically 3 pairs of underwear, and at the same time, there was a set of car keys with an Apple AirTag attached to them. There certainly is more to this story, but I'm not going to touch upon it in this episode. I was thinking about how that's an odd situation, and that led me down a rabbit hole of sorts. I started looking into the craziest stories involving hikers and backpackers and campers. As it stands right now, these 2 stories stand as the greatest mysteries involving hikers and backpackers and campers. The thing is this, these stories are related, even though they took place over 30 years apart from each other. To begin, let's go back to 1993, which was 32 years ago. As you're about to see, my friends, this story is incredibly weird, and at the same time, it's a mystery. To this day, no one knows what happened. Before I start talking about this story, make sure to listen to the next one, because this one's weird, the next one is even more insane. It is crazy. And again, these stories are connected. The story that we're going to focus on is known as the Khamar Daban Mountain Incident that occurred in August of 1993 in the Khamar Daban Mountain Range, which is in southern Siberia. On August 7th, 7 hikers set out on a multi-day adventure. The group consisted of 4 females and 3 men, with most of these individuals having a great deal of experience as hikers, campers, and backpackers. The goal of the group was to traverse the mountain range, but that's not what happened. 6 of the individuals ended up dead, with 1 sole survivor. All 6 of the deaths were mysterious, and at the same time, many of them were brutal. The sole survivor of this group was a 17-year-old female. According to this young girl, in the morning, everyone was packing up. They were getting ready for the day's hike when one of the members collapsed. They started screaming, foaming at the mouth, bleeding from the ears, from the eyes. Within minutes, the exact same thing happened to the other members of the camp. They started convulsing, some were going through stages of panic. In addition to this young girl, there was one other member who was not having any issues. They rushed in to help, but they had a heart attack and died right then and there. She stated that she fled the campsite and spent the night under a tree in a tent that she set up. She goes on to state that the next day she went back to camp and retrieved supplies from the deceased members. That is how she stayed alive. In the following days, she followed a river along with some power lines in hopes of being rescued, and she was. A group of Ukrainian kayakers were going down the river and they saw her, and what they saw scared the living hell out of these people. They come across this girl, and she is covered from head to toe in blood. At the same time, she was having a very hard time speaking, and she could not explain what had happened. According to the coroners who examined the bodies, these individuals died from a combination of hypothermia, that's when their core temperature drops, severe internal damage, as well as severe external damage. Autopsies of these individuals revealed that they had bruised lungs, protein deficiencies due to malnutrition, in addition to their internal injuries. As far as the external injuries go to these individuals, a warning needs to be said, needs to be given. This is going to be graphic. Not disgusting or anything like that, but for sensitive ears, with the individuals who died on this mountain, not counting the guy who had the heart attack, they had fractured skulls, twisted, broken necks, missing eyes, missing tongues, and one of them bit off the knuckle of their hand. They bit it off themselves. Search and rescue and law enforcement found the campsite, and what they found confused them. The camp was orderly. Their items were stored neatly and whatnot. But get this, their tent had been cut and sliced from the inside so that the people on the inside could escape. What also confused law enforcement and the rescue teams is the state of the bodies, and I'm not talking about their injuries, I'm talking about their clothing. In some cases, their lack of clothing. Some of the individuals were completely naked, some were in their underwear, some in their pajamas. Those that were wearing clothes, their clothes were torn up ripped apart by what they believed to be their own hands. What took place at the camp with those individuals remains unsolved, and it is considered one of the greatest mysteries of our time. As you can imagine, there are a wide range of theories as to what took place there, ranging from military experiments, nerve gas weapons, supernatural events, and all sorts of stuff. The thing is, there's no evidence, and there was never any evidence to back up any of those claims, any of those stories. The only thing that we have to go on is the testimony of that 17-year-old girl. Speaking of which, the last time that I know of that she spoke about this story was in 2018. From day one, she has stuck to the exact same story, and to this day, she believes that it was hypothermia that caused the events at camp. She fully denies all possibilities outside of that. Now, everyone, we need to go back in time to the craziest story I have ever heard. And I just told you this one. This story is crazy. Wait until you hear this. The story that I just shared happened in 1993. But get this. The events and the details surrounding this story are not unique. The exact same thing happened back in the 50s. The story that I'm going to go over now is known as the Dyatlov Pass tragedy. And just like the first story, this one is still a mystery. But get this. This story from the 50s, it is one of the most studied and researched mysteries of all time, and it too features a group of experienced hikers and backpackers. The events of the first story took place in Siberia. The events of the second story took place in Russia. To be more specific, the events of this story took place in February of 1959 in the Ural Mountains in Russia. With the first story from the 90s, that group consisted of 7 individuals. With the second story, there were 9 individuals. The first story, there was a survivor. With the second story, there was a survivor. But unfortunately, that survivor has no idea what happened because they were not there. I'll explain more about that in just a minute. We need to start at the beginning. So January 23rd, 1959, a 23-year-old Soviet hiking enthusiast led a group of 8 young hikers, 7 men and 2 women. The vast majority of this group were university students, and they had a goal to reach a nearby peak. I have to say, everyone, the details surrounding this story, it's strange all the way through, but even from the get-go, their actions don't make sense. For an example, when the group set out on January 23rd, the conditions were terrible. They set out in the middle of a big snowstorm. A big snowstorm with sub-zero conditions. Why the group didn't wait for the weather conditions to improve, I do not know. I did a little bit of research about this, but I found no reasoning behind their decisions. 5 days after the group headed out, one individual returned. This individual was having a hard time walking because of the injuries that they had with their knee, but yet they came back by themselves, which is odd even for the time. Why the group allowed this one individual to hike back multi-days by themselves when they were injured is not known either. A month passes. The group did not return. A search and rescue operation is launched. On February the 27th, the first body was located. Oddly enough, the body was found almost 1 mile away from their campsite, from their tent. A few days later, the additional bodies were found in camp, scattered all over the place. But yet, there was no sign of a struggle. Ultimately, it took numerous weeks for all of the bodies to be located. There were signs of trauma, exposure, but at the same time, the campsite did not show any signs of a struggle. In other words, everything about camp looked completely normal. When they took the bodies down from the mountaintop and began looking at their injuries, they were startled, they were stunned, they were horrified. And this is where the story takes a wild turn. If there's any young kids around, you may want to shoo them out of the room because some of the details are graphic. Do you remember when I was going over the details surrounding the injuries from the group in the 90s? With this group from the 50s, they had the exact same injuries. One of the hikers was found to have had major skull fracturing. Several of the hikers were found to have damage to their chests. Another had a cracked skull. One body was found missing an eye. Another was found missing a tongue. With the deceased members of this group, the internal damages that they had were extensive, only comparable to victims of high-speed vehicular accidents. Just like the first story, some of the individuals were naked, some partially clothed. In some cases, clothing was folded neatly into piles, and they could tell by the snow that the individuals just walked away from them. Now, this is very strange, folks. When it comes to the camp that this group had, the search and rescue team, they located the tent. When they looked at the tent, they discovered that the individuals cut their way out of the tent. Instead of opening up the door, they sliced through the side of the tent to escape. According to the initial Russian investigation, what caused this incident was what they referred to as a force of natural origin. They stated that it was an avalanche that caused all of these injuries, but yet there was no evidence of an avalanche taking place. I mentioned before that this case continues to be studied, and it's one of the most researched events that has ever taken place in the outdoors, with hikers, campers, and backpackers and whatnot. In 2023, the Russians released some additional information concerning this case, and they stated the same conclusion. It was an avalanche that caused all of the damages, all of the injuries, and all of the mysteries. As you can imagine, there are all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories that surround this case. The thing is, there might actually be something to them. With the individuals' bodies and their belongings that were found around camp, even up to a mile away, high levels of radiation was detected. What that means, I have zero idea. As far as I can tell, 4 individuals had their bodies and their clothing tested, and radiation was found on them and on their belongings. Radiation levels that were considered unsafe for the time, and even to this day. Speaking of to this day, this story remains a mystery, just as the one from 1993. After reading about both of these stories, the question that came to my mind was, how close together in proximity did these events happen? And folks, it's not even close, not even the same ballpark. We're talking about over 1,700 miles of distance between each of these events. They also happened at different elevation levels. The one in Siberia took place at roughly 2,700 feet, and the one in Russia took place at roughly 7,800 feet. Each event also took place in different seasons. One was in August, the other was in January, February. Both groups faced extreme weather conditions while they were out. And if you had to ask me what the cause was, based upon what I've read, I would say it was hypothermia. Hypothermia explains almost everything minus the radiation. Just in case you don't know, hypothermia is where your core body temperature drops below 95 degrees. When your body temperature drops below this level, there will be an impairment to your brain functionality. Uncontrolled shivering, confusion, you can experience hallucinations, acts of violence and aggression. Seriously folks, when your body core temperature drops below 95 degrees, all sorts of crazy things can take place. Actions from that point forward will not make any sense at all. As you can see there, hypothermia does explain much of what took place, but certainly not all. The radiation, for one. Also, the bleeding from the ears and the eyes, that's not explained. But acts of violence certainly are. I did a little bit of research and I found at least 3 cases where hypothermia was related to murder. But these are, without a doubt, extreme circumstances, very rare events. So it's possible, but yet unlikely. With the story from the 50s, ultimately, we will never know exactly what happened. First off, you have Russia, the government, they're not going to tell the truth no matter what, right? It is just how it is in that country. With the case in Siberia, there's only one person who knows what happened for sure, and that was the young girl who survived, the 17-year-old. My theory is this, and I could be wrong, and I want to state that, but that girl knows more than what she let on. Maybe she did something and she's not proud of it, so she has a story, she's sticking to it, and I understand that. Another possibility is that she has memory loss and she has, seriously, no clue as to what had happened. But she was covered in blood for a reason. My question is, was it her blood or someone else's? This question I was not able to answer with any sort of research. Ultimately, my friends, with both cases, they are mysteries. I want to hear from you all. Comment down below and share your thoughts. What happened in these cases in Russia and Siberia? Unfortunately, I believe we will never find out for sure. The conspiracy theories and whatnot, they will continue. And in this case, they may be justified. Was it some sort of military cover-up? Weapons testing? Was it something supernatural? Was it something supernatural? I don't think so. That's just my thoughts, but no. Everything else is much more likely, especially in regards to Russia. In the case with the Russian group, there is some evidence to support the possibility of some sort of weapons testing in that area. It's not conclusive, but it's certainly possible. My friends, thank you very much for tuning in to this Newswave episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up. I do appreciate it. Until next time, everyone, take care, be well, strength and honor. These are the two craziest stories I've ever heard, bar none.